The morning my world turned upside down started with a phone call that jolted me awake at 5:30 a.m. I had been away from my home in Lakeside Pines, a quiet suburban community in Northern Virginia, for exactly 8 months. My job as an environmental consultant had taken me to remote locations in South America, documenting the impact of mining operations on local ecosystems. It was demanding work that had completely disconnected me from my life back home, including, apparently, the fact that someone had built a playground on my property. Mr. Oliver. James Oliver? The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, deep, and urgent. "Yes, speaking," I mumbled, still half asleep, the phone pressed awkwardly against my ear as I tried to focus. The fan in my hotel room in Lima hummed softly, providing white noise against the early morning traffic outside. "This is Miguel, your neighbor from across the street. I thought you should know there's a construction crew setting up playground equipment on your back property. Has been going on for weeks now, but it's looking like they're finishing today. Thought maybe you'd authorized it, but something didn't seem right." I sat bolt upright, suddenly wide awake. "What? A playground? On my property? I haven't authorized anything." My property in Lakeside Pines consisted of just under 2 acres. The house sat at the front, with a large backyard that extended into a wooded area. That space had been one of the main reasons I'd purchased the property 3 years ago. The privacy and natural setting it provided were exactly what I wanted. "Yeah," Miguel continued, "that land behind your house. The HOA folks have been supervising. They've cleared trees, poured concrete, the whole 9 yards. It's almost done swings, slides, one of those fancy climbing structures." I felt a surge of anger mixed with disbelief. The Lakeside Pines Homeowners Association had always been aggressive with their rules and regulations, but this was something else entirely. Before leaving for my assignment, I'd made arrangements for lawn care and basic maintenance, but I certainly hadn't given anyone permission to build anything on my land. "Miguel, I need a huge favor. Can you go over there and tell them to stop immediately? Tell them the owner has not authorized any construction. I'm going to book the next flight home. I'll head over now, but I'm not sure they'll listen. That HOA president, Patricia Henderson, she's been strutting around like she owns the place, always in those pastel pantsuits with her clipboard." Patricia Henderson. The name alone made my blood pressure rise. She'd been elected HOA president shortly before my departure, replacing a reasonable retired engineer who had run things smoothly for years. I'd only had a few interactions with her, but they had been unpleasant nitpicking about the shade of my mailbox and the positioning of my trash cans. "Just try, please. I'm coming home. Tell them there will be legal consequences." After hanging up, I immediately began making arrangements to return home. My contract in South America was nearly complete anyway, and my supervisor understood the emergency. Within hours, I had a flight booked for the following morning. During my 20-hour journey from Lima to Miami, then to Washington Dulles, I researched property law on my tablet, trying to understand exactly what rights I had and what the HOA could and couldn't do. What I found was reassuring. No HOA had the right to build structures on private property without explicit owner consent. This wasn't a gray area, it was blatantly illegal. I landed at Dulles late the following evening, rented a car, and drove straight to Lakeside Pines, arriving just after midnight. Exhausted but too agitated to sleep, I walked through my dusty house to the back patio and shined a flashlight out into my yard. What I saw made my jaw drop. Where there had once been a natural wooded area with mature oak trees and a small clearing I'd used for occasional camping, there was now a fully constructed playground. The moonlight revealed colorful plastic slides, a swing set, monkey bars, and a central play structure with tunnels and bridges. A concrete walkway surrounded it, with benches placed at intervals. They had even installed lighting on tall poles. At least 15 trees had been removed. The entire area had been cleared, leveled, and transformed. This wasn't just a small swing set, this was a full community playground, the kind you'd see in a public park. I stood there in shock, my flashlight beam moving slowly across the scene. My property, my private space, had been completely violated. I checked the time, 1:15 a.m. Too late to do anything about it tonight, but first thing in the morning, I would be paying Patricia Henderson a visit. Sleep came fitfully that night. I tossed and turned, imagining confrontations with the HOA board, legal battles, and the headache of restoring my property. By 7:00 a.m., I was showered, dressed, and heading toward Patricia Henderson's house with a folder containing my property deed, a survey map clearly showing my property lines, and printouts of relevant HOA bylaws and state property laws. Patricia lived in a meticulously maintained colonial-style house 6 blocks from mine. Her lawn was perfectly manicured, with geometrically precise hedges and flower beds full of coordinating colors. A proud member of Lakeside Pines HOA sign stood prominently by her mailbox. I rang the doorbell and waited, trying to keep my emotions in check. The door swung open to reveal Patricia Henderson herself, a woman in her 50s with highlighted blonde hair cut in a precise bob, wearing a light pink blouse and white capri pants. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of me. "James Oliver," she said, not as a question but as a statement. "You're back." "I am," I replied, my voice tight. "And I'd like to discuss why there's a playground on my property that I never authorized." Patricia's expression shifted to one of mild annoyance. "Why don't you come in? We can discuss this civilly." I followed her into a living room decorated in shades of beige and cream, with perfectly arranged furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. Family photos lined the mantel. Patricia with who I assumed was her husband and 2 adult children. Coffee. She offered. "No, thank you. I'd like to get straight to the point. Who authorized construction on my land?" She sat down in an armchair and gestured for me to take the sofa across from her. "The Homeowners Association Board voted unanimously to develop that space as a community playground. We've been wanting to add recreational facilities for years, and that location was perfect, central to the neighborhood and unused." "Unused doesn't mean available," I said, opening my folder. "This is my property deed. This is the survey showing the boundaries. That land belongs to me, and no one, not even the HOA, has the right to build anything on it without my permission." Patricia smiled thinly. "Actually, James, there are provisions in our bylaws for community development projects. Section 14, paragraph C allows for the development of shared spaces for the benefit of all residents." "Shared spaces, yes, but my backyard isn't a shared space. It's private property." I pulled out the HOA bylaws I had printed. Section 14 refers to designated common areas, not private lots. "What you've done is illegal. It's trespassing and destruction of private property." Her smile faded. "We sent certified letters to your address informing you of the plans. When you didn't respond, we proceeded according to the non-response clause in the bylaws. I was out of the country for work. I had mail forwarding set up, but certainly never received any certified letters about this." I leaned forward. "Even if you sent 100 letters, you can't build on private property without the owner's consent. It's not just against HOA rules, it's against state law." Patricia's posture stiffened. "The playground serves the entire community. We've already had dozens of families using it. Would you really deprive the children of this neighborhood of a safe place to play? That's hardly being a good neighbor." "That's not the point. The point is that you had no right to make that decision for my property." I was trying to remain calm, but my voice was rising. "Who paid for this construction?" "The HOA fund, of course. We allocated $175,000 for the project from our reserves and a special assessment." I nearly choked. $175,000? To build something illegally on my property? "For a state-of-the-art playground with safety features and ADA compliance," she corrected, as if the price tag somehow legitimized the theft of my land. "And we don't agree with your interpretation of the bylaws." It's not about interpretation, it's about property law. I stood up, gathering my documents. I want construction stopped immediately, and I want a plan for removing the playground and restoring my property within 7 days. Patricia rose as well, her face flushing slightly. That won't be happening, Mr. Oliver. The playground is complete and already in use. If you have concerns, you can bring them up at the next board meeting, 2 weeks from Tuesday. This isn't a matter for a board meeting. This is a legal issue, and if the playground isn't removed, I'll be forced to take legal action. She walked me to the door. I think you'll find the community strongly supports this project. Fighting the entire neighborhood won't make your life here very pleasant. As she closed the door behind me, I stood on her porch seething. The arrogance was astounding. She genuinely believed the HOA had the right to commandeer my property for their purposes. I spent the rest of the morning documenting everything. I took photographs of the playground from every angle, noting the extent of the clearing and construction. I marked the property boundaries based on my survey. I even found the stumps of several oak trees I had particularly valued. One had been over 100 years old. By noon, I was sitting in the office of Thomas Wright, a local attorney who specialized in property disputes and HOA issues. "This is remarkable," Thomas said, reviewing the photos and documents I had brought. He was a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. "I've dealt with overreaching HOAs for 30 years, but building an entire playground on private property while the owner is away, that's a new one. What are my options?" I asked. "Legally, you're in an extremely strong position," he assured me. "No HOA bylaw can override basic property rights. The fact that they built a permanent structure on your land without permission is a clear violation of the law. So I can force them to remove it, absolutely. We can file for an injunction requiring them to restore your property to its original condition at their expense." He leaned back in his chair. "But there's another angle to consider." "What's that?" "Under Virginia law, anything permanently affixed to the land becomes part of the real property. That playground, every swing, slide, and bench now legally belongs to you." I blinked, processing this information. "So you're saying?" "I'm saying that the HOA just spent $175,000 improving your property with a playground that you now own outright. You could, if you wanted, simply put up a fence around it with private property signs and keep it for yourself." The thought had a certain poetic justice to it that made me smile despite my anger. Can they really not claim any ownership after building it? They built it illegally on land they knew wasn't theirs. It's no different than if I built a garage on your land without permission. The garage would be yours, not mine, regardless of what I spent on it. What about liability issues? That's a valid concern, Thomas acknowledged. If you decide to keep the playground, you'd want proper insurance coverage. Alternatively, you could offer to sell or lease the playground area to the HOA on your terms. I considered this. The idea of turning the tables on Patricia Henderson and the HOA board was appealing. After they had so blatantly disregarded my property rights, making them negotiate with me seemed fitting. Let's start with a cease and desist letter, I decided. I want them to understand the legal situation before we discuss any potential resolution. Thomas nodded. "I'll have it drafted today. In the meantime, I suggest you document any interactions with HOA members regarding the playground. Virginia is a one-party consent state for recordings, so feel free to record conversations if needed." I left Thomas's office with a plan in place. He would send a formal legal notice to the HOA board by the end of the day, and we would proceed based on their response. I felt better having taken concrete action, but my anger hadn't subsided. The casual disregard for my property rights still stunned me. As I drove back to my house, I noticed children playing on the new playground, my playground, technically. Families had spread blankets on the grassy areas, and parents chatted on the benches while watching their kids. In any other context, it would have been a charming scene. I parked in my driveway and walked around to the back of my house. A narrow path now connected my patio to the playground area, another unauthorized addition to my property. As I stood watching, a woman noticed me and approached with a smile. "You must be James Oliver." "I'm Tanya Nelson from down the street." She extended her hand. "We're all so grateful for this wonderful new playground. The kids just love it." I shook her hand automatically. "I didn't authorize this playground, Miss Nelson. The HOA built it on my private property without permission while I was out of the country." Her smile faltered. "Oh, I had no idea. The HOA announcement said the space had been dedicated to the community." "Well, that's not true. This is my land and I never dedicated it to anyone." A man approached, holding the hand of a young boy about 5 years old. "Everything okay here, Tanya? This is James Oliver, the owner of the house," she explained, gesturing toward me. "There seems to be some confusion about the playground." "Marcus Thompson," he introduced himself. "HOA board member. We're really excited about this new amenity for the neighborhood. Great addition to property values." "Did Patricia tell the board this was my private property?" I asked directly. Marcus looked uncomfortable. "The board was told the land had been properly secured for community use, with all legal requirements met." "That's not true," I stated firmly. "No one contacted me and no one had permission to build here." By now, several other parents had moved closer, listening to our conversation. I could see concerned looks being exchanged. "Look," Marcus said in a lowered voice, "why don't we discuss this privately? I'm sure we can work something out that benefits everyone." "My attorney will be contacting the HOA board today," I replied, loud enough for others to hear. "For now, you should all be aware that this playground was built illegally on private property." As I walked back to my house, I could hear the buzz of conversation behind me. Good, I thought. The more residents who knew the truth, the more pressure there would be on Patricia and the board. The next morning, I woke to find a printed notice taped to my front door. "Emergency HOA meeting tonight, 7:00 p.m. Community Center Playground dispute." I smiled to myself. The legal notice from Thomas must have hit home. Now the board was scrambling to manage the situation. Throughout the day, I received several phone calls from neighbors. Some were supportive after learning what had happened, expressing shock at the HOA's actions. Others were concerned about losing the playground their children had already grown attached to. A few were openly hostile, suggesting I was being selfish and should just donate the land for the good of the community. By evening, I had spoken with Thomas again and formulated a strategy for the meeting. I arrived at the community center to find the parking lot full and the meeting room packed with at least 100 residents. Patricia Henderson stood at the front with the other board members, looking considerably less composed than during our previous encounter. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began once everyone was seated. "As many of you have heard, we have a situation regarding the new community playground. We wanted to address this directly and transparently." I had to suppress a laugh at the word transparently. "The board acted in good faith to provide a valuable community resource," she continued. "We followed all procedures outlined in our bylaws for development projects." From the back of the room, I spoke up clearly. "Except for securing legal permission from the property owner." All heads turned in my direction. Patricia forced a smile. "James Oliver has recently returned from an extended absence and has expressed concerns about the playground location. We're here to discuss a path forward that works for everyone." I stood and walked toward the front of the room. "Let me clarify something for everyone here. This isn't a matter of me having concerns. The HOA built a playground on my private property without permission. That's not just against HOA rules, it's illegal." Murmurs spread through the crowd. "We sent multiple notices," Patricia insisted. "To an address you knew I wasn't occupying," I countered. "And even if I had received them, no number of notices creates the right to build on someone else's land without permission." Marcus Thompson stood up. "Perhaps we could discuss compensation for the land. The HOA could purchase that section of your property retroactively." That might have been an option if you'd approached me before construction, I replied. But now we have a different situation. Under Virginia law, anything permanently affixed to my land becomes my property. So legally, I now own a $175,000 playground that the HOA paid for. The room erupted in conversation. Patricia tried to call for order, tapping a gavel on the podium. "That's ridiculous," someone shouted. "It's actually basic property law," I responded. "My attorney has confirmed it." If someone builds something on your land without permission, it becomes yours, not theirs. A woman near the front stood up. "So what are you saying? You're going to fence it off and keep our kids from using it, after our HOA fees paid for it?" "I haven't decided yet," I answered honestly. "What I know is that the HOA board acted illegally, misused your HOA funds, and violated my property rights. They should be held accountable for that." Patricia Henderson's face had grown increasingly red. "We acted in the community's best interest. That land was sitting unused." "It was private property," I said firmly. "Just like your backyard is private property. How would you feel if the board decided your yard would make a great location for a community pool and built it while you were on vacation?" This analogy seemed to resonate with many in the room, and I noticed several nodding heads. An older gentleman stood up. "I've lived here for 20 years, and I've never seen the HOA overstep like this. I move that the board issue a formal apology to Mr. Oliver and negotiate fair terms for either removing the playground or properly acquiring the land." "Second," called several voices. Patricia looked like she might explode. "This isn't on the agenda. We can't vote on this tonight." "Actually," said a woman I recognized as the HOA secretary, "emergency meetings can address any urgent business by majority consent, according to our bylaws." The motion was put to a vote, and it passed overwhelmingly. Even board members, sensing the mood of the room, voted in favor, all except Patricia and Marcus. Patricia finally addressed me directly. "What do you want, James? What's your price?" I took a moment before responding. "I don't want to deprive children of a playground, but I do want accountability. Here are my terms. First, a formal acknowledgement that the HOA acted illegally. Second, the resignation of board members who knowingly approved construction on private property. Third, I'll consider leasing the land to the HOA for a nominal amount with certain conditions." "What conditions?" Marcus asked suspiciously. "The HOA will maintain appropriate liability insurance. Access hours will be limited to daylight hours to protect my privacy. And the lease will include restoration requirements if the arrangement ends returning my property to its natural state." The room was quiet as people considered this. "That seems reasonable," someone finally said. Patricia was seething. "This is extortion. We improved your property value significantly." "No," I corrected her. "You trespassed on my land and removed mature trees that I valued." "That's not an improvement from my perspective." The meeting continued for another hour, with residents asking questions and sharing opinions. By the end, a clear majority supported my position, and the board minus Patricia, who stormed out, agreed to meet with my attorney to formalize an agreement. Over the next 2 weeks, things moved quickly. Patricia Henderson resigned as HOA president after it emerged that she had known all along that the playground location was on private property. Documents revealed she had specifically instructed board members not to highlight this fact in meetings. Marcus Thompson also resigned when emails showed he had raised concerns about the legality, but proceeded anyway. Thomas Wright negotiated a formal agreement with the new interim board. I would lease the playground area to the HOA for $1 per year for an initial term of 5 years, renewable upon mutual agreement. The HOA would maintain a $2 million liability policy, naming me as an additional insured. Hours would be limited to 9:00 a.m. until sunset, with appropriate signage. The HOA would also pay for professional landscaping to create a privacy buffer between my house and the playground. Perhaps most satisfying was the formal acknowledgement, included in the agreement and distributed to all homeowners, that the previous board had acted improperly and illegally. It set a precedent that would hopefully prevent similar overreach in the future. As part of the settlement, I also required the HOA to plant 20 new trees in common areas throughout the neighborhood to replace those that had been removed from my property. I specifically requested oak varieties similar to the ones I had lost. 3 months after my unexpected return home, I stood on my back patio watching children play on the playground. The newly planted privacy hedge was still small, but would grow to provide the separation I wanted. The updated rules were clearly posted, and so far, people had been respectful of the boundaries. My doorbell rang, and I found Tanya Nelson standing there with a plate of cookies. "Peace offering," she said with a smile. "And a thank you. The new board is much more transparent about everything. We're even getting itemized financial reports now." I invited her in, and over coffee, she filled me in on the neighborhood changes. Patricia Henderson had put her house on the market and was moving to a different community. The new board had instituted checks and balances to prevent any similar situations. And surprisingly, property values had increased apparently. A neighborhood with accountable governance was attractive to buyers. "I have to admit," Tanya said, "when this first happened, some of us thought you were being difficult, but you were right to stand up to them. The HOA was completely out of line." "I never wanted to be the neighborhood troublemaker," I told her. "I just wanted my property rights respected." "Well, you ended up improving things for everyone." She glanced out the window toward the playground. "And the kids still get their playground. That's a win-win in my book." As summer turned to fall, the playground continued to be a popular spot for neighborhood families. I found that I didn't mind the sounds of children playing. It had a cheerful quality that actually made my property feel more alive. The clear boundaries and rules meant my privacy was respected, and several neighbors had gone out of their way to ensure their children understood the importance of being good neighbors. The experience had transformed my relationship with my community. Before, I had been largely disconnected, focusing on work and spending time alone on my property. Now, I knew most of my neighbors by name and had been invited to community events I would have previously skipped. 1 year after the playground incident, the new HOA president, a retired judge named Walter Simmons, who understood property law, intimately asked if I would consider joining the Architectural Review Committee. I surprised myself by accepting. If nothing else, I could help ensure no one else's property rights were violated. The playground that had been built without my permission had, ironically, become a bridge connecting me to my community. It was a daily reminder that standing up for yourself doesn't have to mean standing alone. Sometimes, it means creating better systems that protect everyone's rights. In the end, I had gained not just legal ownership of a playground, but something more valuable: a neighborhood where boundaries were respected, and community was built on consent rather than coercion. The last time I saw Patricia Henderson was at the grocery store 6 months after she'd moved. She avoided eye contact and hurried down another aisle. I heard from other neighbors that she'd joined the HOA board in her new community, but had been remarkably quiet in meetings. Perhaps she'd learned something from our encounter after all. As for the playground, it remained a bright spot in the neighborhood both literally and figuratively. The children who played there probably had no idea of the drama surrounding its creation. To them, it was simply a place of joy. And in the end, that's what mattered most. My property line was now clearly marked with decorative fencing and landscaping, a gentle but unmistakable reminder of where public space ended and private property began. It was a physical manifestation of the boundaries we all need, not to keep others out, but to ensure that our connections are built on mutual respect rather than assumption or entitlement. On warm evenings, I sometimes sat on my patio with a book, the distant sounds of children playing creating a pleasant backdrop. My anger had long since faded, replaced by a quiet satisfaction. The system had worked, rights had been respected, community had been preserved. And in a neighborhood governed by rules, I had discovered the most important one. Sometimes you have to stand firm to create the space where everyone can stand together.